You're listening to the Survivor Sweat Podcast with Mike Buckmiller and Russell Rosenblum. If you're looking for strategy articles and just about everything Survivor, head to survivorsweat.com. Now, let's get to it.
All right, we are back. The Survivor Sweat Pod in the Simply Vegas studio, heading into week 16.
Yes, sir. Neither Thanksgiving nor Christmas.
And for the second week in a row...
Maybe next year for Hanukkah, you should have to pick 8 games. Just a thought.
We lost a grand total of 1. Absolutely hilarious.
And we lost the 1 before anybody else even took the field.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hilarious. They may have to chop this up 30 ways now.
Could be.
Who knows?
Are they going to start the second chance maybe week 17? Like, when are we going to get that in place?
The third chance.
The third chance.
Yes.
The last chance.
Well, if you go to Survivor Sweat, you might have a third chance, fourth chance.
Can you imagine that's the game you get knocked out on, that Thursday night game, the real barn burner there? It was like 9-6 or something.
Well, I'm Mike Buckmiller. This is Russell Rosenblum. We are the 2022-23 Circa Survivor champion under the Jed entry name. Jed is dead, but if you've watched the last 2, you know that we just cannot quit this contest, and we have a small piece, but with no pick control.
That's true.
No pick control.
Doesn't mean we have no comments about the pick.
This is true.
We just don't get to push the button.
This is true. Well, to recap, 1 hit the skids, as I'd mentioned.
Indeed.
We have now hit the 50 mark, so 50 of the original 14,266 entries remain. 99.65% of the pool has been eliminated through week 15, and it seems like it's been that way for the last 2 weeks.
Pretty much. I think we've lost, 4 people in 3 weeks or something like that, give or take?
Mm-hmm. All the picks were entered. Fantastic. After 15 weeks last year, there were 10 that remain. This year, again, 50 that still have the dream of taking home the winner-take-all, 14,266,000 winner-take-all prize.
I'll take it.
The 266 is for the tip.
Exactly.
It's tipping.
It's the tip money. Welcome to Vegas.
For sure, for sure. Now, there are 2 that have multiple entries, so in theory, 48 still have a dream, and of course, all the other people that have pieces also have a dream of taking down a piece of the pie. So, the exciting week 15, what was your takeaway from all these selections?
Just annoying as always. You were watching all these teams that are so close to going out. It's not like there weren't any spots where a team could go out. There were, and they just didn't. And I know it sounds terrible, and I'm sorry if you're out there listening, although I'm glad if you're out there listening, I guess. The one guy very early on that gave us a hard time for why would they take San Francisco now? They should have held them. And then I think almost every other week someone took San Francisco. San Francisco lost. I didn't think it was a terrible pick. We never talked about it. I didn't think it was a terrible pick. I was actually more surprised that nobody was on the Falcons.
Yeah.
They had some future value, but it was a good spot against the Raiders. I mean, look, they just won a game where, and I understand at the end of the day it was a 6-point game, but it was not really a 6-point game throughout. The Raiders had a deep pass late. Falcons turned the ball over again late. You know, you look at this, the Falcons, how bad are the Raiders that the Falcons win the game, then bench their quarterback?
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty rare. Usually you got to lose a game to get benched, especially if you're getting $50 million. It's not like a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. And I also was surprised that nobody was on Atlanta. Now, the news on Crosby came out late, maybe 3 o'clock, 3:30, right around submission time. So
yeah, but Atlanta wasn't a bad play, even if you were 100% sure Crosby was playing.
I'm just wondering if that would have tilted
I would think
one
so.
or two possibly that way.
I would think so.
And the timing of that obviously was instrumental, and nobody showing up with the Falcons there. You know, Detroit 6 Mile tried to slip one through with the 49ers on Thursday. I mean, I don't think it's that bad of a play. He took a spot, took a chance. Divisional game, short week. I hate those, but you know what I mean? He tried to slip one by. Probably felt like he was going to be isolated there, which he was. The move didn't work.
I think he feels pretty isolated now.
This is true. This is true.
The only one that busted. He's one of a kind. Actually, the Rams are an underrated team anyway. They've been pretty good.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, they have been playing really good football as of late. Our piece was on the Ravens.
Yes, sir.
And I mean, great spot. I mean,
It is. Look, I mean, it's easy in hindsight. Like we did, despite not making pick and roll, we did have long, agonizing conversations.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation started in the first 30 seconds of, okay, we're probably going to take the Ravens, right? Not much to talk about, right? And then we still decided to break down in every other game. Before you know it, it's an hour that we're breaking down the games. And, we did talk about, would we be willing to take a team like Cincinnati? And like in hindsight, of course, I wish we did because they won. And because you still had a lot of people on Baltimore. And it was tough because you'd like to save Baltimore for maybe for Christmas. And they have, I think they had the game the week after Christmas too. Not as good, but if they lose on Christmas, that becomes kind of a must-win game. And I don't know what Christmas is going to look like now. And, you've got, I don't want to get too far into the future, but you've got spots now. What's up with, I haven't looked, what's up with Geno?
Yeah, questionable for this week. Maybe trending in the right direction. Nobody knows at this point.
Right.
But,
and so if he plays this week, and he looks decent, presumably playing Christmas, even if they say, though, in most cases, if they say trending to play and he just doesn't play, pretty high probability he plays the next week. Not like 90, but like normally it's like probably 70. Here with the next week being 4 days later, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
30% if you don't.
Yeah, these short weeks here and these special weeks. I mean, you really got to troll those injury reports, and especially when it's to a quarterback. I mean, it just makes all the difference.
And you're in a weird spot too, just because of the timing that you got to put the pick in, right? So even though that game takes place 1 day later, that also means they don't have to put their injury report for an extra day.
True.
Right. So you're 1 day late and even knowing what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I figured Minnesota would have a lot of ownership, which they did, 29%. Baltimore, 12 were on them. I know some had limitations on their Christmas selection, so only 19 could take them. The others held back to maybe they weren't quite sure where they were going to land there, so they need to give themselves some options. Arizona, I thought there would be a few more
as well.
10. And then Cincinnati, Cincinnati shows up with 8, a little high for me. I thought 4, 5 maybe. Right. And then Washington, no surprise, 6 could take them. 5 did.
Yep.
So maybe one held it back, didn't like the spot, and maybe they can isolate themselves maybe on week 18 when Washington plays Dallas. I'm not sure if that game's going to matter or not, but obviously they could do so. And then, of course, the one that tried to slip it through with the old 49ers. Just unfortunate not to make it there, but... Man.
Yeah, look, again, it's a tricky spot. That said, and I have, didn't spend a lot of time in the random guys' possible selections, but he's held San Francisco this long, and then if he doesn't take them last week, he's got to look at what's basically a coin flip game at Miami, a decent-sized underdog at home versus Detroit, and nominally more than a coin flip game at Arizona to end the season, which is a game that almost certainly at this point is not likely to matter for the 49ers.
Sure.
And so I don't think I think Arizona could actually turn out to be a slightly larger favorite.
Yeah, for sure.
But I never know what's going to happen in those Week 18 games. We've seen some bizarre stuff in the past.
Yeah, so. Week 18, absolute crapshoot. You just don't know if some are going to create their own bye and sit some of their players. If it matters from a playoff standpoint or not, you just never know.
Right, and who's going to play because they're playing for contracts, and who's going to not play because they have their contracts, and which coaches are playing for contracts, which GMs are playing for draft choices. I mean, who knows?
Crazy.
I mean, it's the worst kept secret in the NFL, right? That GMs do play for draft choices.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, of course they do, and yet the NFL just doesn't really acknowledge it. But of course it's true.
No. Nick, how do some of the notables do in Week 15?
Well, let's go back to talking about the Commanders, NFL wise guys. We were
Suck out City.
Yeah, we were maybe thinking. I think we said last week we were like, "Is NFL wise guys gonna split up their picks?" And they didn't. So
did not.
2 Commanders of the 5.
Man, and
never in doubt.
It looked like the Commanders were just going to run away with that football game.
Yep.
And then lo and behold, the fourth quarter. Oh man, they go down, they score. I mean, there was a question about the clock there at the end.
Yep.
The ref comes in and he's, kind of pausing the clock. I don't know if it's because they were piling on.
That's what I thought. But
down,
apparently the NFL acknowledged later it was just a mistake. So.
Yeah, how about that? So they score, and then of course the whole time, just in my mind, I'm like, they're going for 2.
Oh, yeah, you said that as we were driving down the field because I said this is the worst case scenario for me because it's, all about me. No, I had in our millions entry, I had Commanders minus 7.5, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sitting there at one point when the Commanders are covering, and then I'm saying, but we also had in fantasy, we had Jaden Daniels.
Yes, we did.
Right, and we had Robinson, running back, right? So
We did.
I said, look, if this game at the end of the day, and we wanted to see, nothing personal wise, guys, we wanted to see the Commanders go down to help the equity of our own share of our survivor pick, right? So as I said, as they're driving down the field, well, I mean, worst case, they get in the end zone, they go to overtime, at least our fantasy, we're done for the 7.5, that's dead. But at least our fantasy players will be live. And Mike goes, no, they're not, because they're going to go for 2. And there was still like 4 minutes left. I'm like, yeah, you're right, they are. And so I said, at least I hope they, at that point, we're dead in the fantasy. I'm like, I hope they at least get the 2-point conversion because then at least we'll knock some people out of Survivor. The absolute worst thing they could do is go down, go for 2, lose the game by 1. We lose the millions, we lose in the millions entry. We don't get any more action on fantasy, and we don't lose anybody in Survivor. Guess what happened?
Yeah, fun times. Fun times. Oh, my gosh.
And then you guys were on the Ravens. Anything else you want to say about those birds?
I mean,
I think we watched the game for about 7 minutes more than necessary.
When you're on the Ravens, and a few weeks back when we were on the Lions against the Jacksonville Jags, and I mean, it never seems easy. But in
that one was easy.
Yeah,
though,
in both of those games, just like boom, you just push the button, you think you're going to win, and then you're like, okay, this is when people are supposed to get clipped. Right here, right now.
Yep.
But if you take those teams and nobody goes down, I mean, in theory, you're losing equity because, it's just...
Correct.
Sometimes when you win, you lose, and
like
lose,
if you
you
take,
win.
If you take the Bengals there and nobody goes down, you pick up equity because you still have Baltimore left.
Sure.
When you take Baltimore there and no one goes down, it's slightly negative for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Lions, though, I know we were talking about it a few weeks ago, but interesting the other day where it's 11, 12 minutes left, 10 minutes left. They're getting crushed. They can't really stop the Bills. They score and they choose to go for the onside kick, right? And basically the Bills virtually run it back for a touchdown, and they almost get in the end zone right away. And they score subsequently, of course, anyway. That was one of the stranger onside kicks I've seen, like timing-wise.
Yeah.
And then so you think at that point he realizes that we can't stop the Bills, so we're just going to have to onside kick, or they're going to score every time anyway.
Sure.
So, of course, the next time they drive down the field and score, and they just kick it away. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
If it was right at 12 minutes, how can it not be right at 10 minutes? But I give him credit in the interview. You said you heard the interview, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. The one thing, I mean, the new kickoff rules, okay, you're still trying to get used to them, but it takes away the surprise.
Oh, it sucks.
Because, he could have surprised
Correct.
onside kick there,
Correct.
maybe have a better chance. But when you're declaring hey, we're onside kicking, I mean, it just takes away that element.
It does a lot because even if you were to get out there, you're unlikely to take that onside kick at 12 minutes. But if you had the opportunity to do it by surprise, it's not impossible that Buffalo says, you know what, we're going to give up on the return here. We have to make sure they don't onside kick. We're going to send out the hands people. Mm-hmm. But then you're able to kick it away.
Sure.
Right? So you can pick up some edge, and that happens a lot in the NFL too, where the receiving team really happened in the NFL, I should say. Receiving team really isn't sure what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Once they're sure, it's just boring. I don't understand, and I've said this before, and I think the NFL should do something to make an onside kick somehow recoverable. I know they've talked about 4th and 15, 4th and 20 in lieu of an onside kick. They should do something, even just out of their own self-interest, because if you have a 9-point game, you actually don't want people turning it off. You want people to continue to watch this stuff. Yeah. And if it's a 9-point game with a minute 10, people just kind of turn it off. There's no way.
I'll be interested to see what the data is in terms of injuries on the kickoff, and how it's different from years prior.
The thing I don't understand, it should be a lot different, but the thing I don't understand this year, and I struggle with this, is why anybody isn't why you're not always just kicking it into the end zone and calling it a day. I can't understand why you're trying to drop the ball to 2. Almost every time I see that happen, I see someone get past 30 anyway.
Sure.
I don't quite understand that.
The data for the onside kick too, it's it's only a 10% recovery rate.
Oh no, it's nowhere close to 10.
It's not even 10.
No, I think it's way below that.
No, I think
oh my god.
3 or 4 weeks ago there were only 2 recovered for the year. Maybe I think there's still only 2, but let's just say there are 4. I actually think there's still only 2. So it could be 4. I mean, it could be 4%. There's got to be at least 100.
Yeah. No, for sure.
It wasn't 10 in the best of times. It was always really hard. But they should do something. And by the way, speaking of kicking, I don't remember if you've said this on the pod before, but you should go on record in case you're right. Because it'd be cool to just have you on record to say it. Because
I'll dig back in the archives.
Yeah, like early in the year, I mean, 65-yarders, 60-yarders. I mean, we were discussing, is this going to be the year there's going to be the 70-yard kick? I mean, kickers were a weapon maybe the first 2, 3, 4 weeks. And out of nowhere, 23-yarders are missed, 33-yarders are missed, 38-yarders are missed, 50. And I'm like, we're gonna find out sometime in the offseason that they changed the kicking ball. Something happened that the NFL said, yeah, we can't have this. Because they were just coming across midfield, lining up and taking the three, and it was absolute money. Now, extra points are shaky, 38-yarders are shaky. I mean, they line up now, and I'm like, that kick's getting missed more times than not. And so I think we're going to find out.
We have like zero evidence of this, but it's interesting
zero
speculation.
Evidence whatsoever, but it's like the humidor in baseball where they were like, okay, we can't have this. The ball's juiced. So then they, bring in the humidor and they start doctoring the baseballs because the balls are just launching out. And so I think, well, it's speculation, but I think the NFL did something to the kicking ball.
It is strange you'd have this many. It's not like, yes, Justin Tucker suddenly has gone ice cold. And even though that seems unusual, best kicker of all time, certainly possible. But when you get all of these kickers, it is very strange. The only thing that's the same is the ball. And for those that don't know this, most of you out there are pretty degenerate. You probably do know this. I didn't know this until the Tom Brady fiasco a number of years back. But when Mike says the kicker ball, the kickers have their own balls. They don't use the same balls that the quarterbacks use. They get different balls, and the quarterbacks each keep their own balls. And it's sort of a strange thing.
I never witnessed this or saw this in real time, but somebody I spoke to said that Tucker was on the sideline shaking one of the balls up to his ear and took it over to the official.
Really?
So, I mean, I don't know if there's footage of that or what's going on. I have no idea.
Strange.
But again, it's all speculation, but something changed. I don't know what it
certainly
was.
Looks that way.
And it wasn't just the kicker. Jeez.
And a shout out, actually, since we're talking about kicking, to Josh Aria out there, who was so close. And he was public about this, was out on Twitter. He had a bet, was it in the next 2 years or something like that?
Yeah.
That there would be a 70-yard field goal, I believe.
Yes.
And he actually got one lined up. It was total shank, but he had to be pretty psyched to watch that.
When they were lining up, I'm like, this is it. This is it. And this was the kicker to do it. The guy from Dallas. He can launch him. And, of course, it's just
not even close. It wasn't like it missed by 2 yards. It's just
which is even now worse because now they're never going to try it again.
They should, but who knows?
Yeah. Maybe if it's indoors, perfect weather.
It can give McCarthy a chance to get in the hall, get on the record book for something that he's the guy that sent the kicker out to kick the 70. Yeah. So when he's looking for a job next year, he has something to put on the CV.
So as you
coached Aaron Rodgers, doesn't like me. Just keep going down the list.
So Nick, as you mentioned, the NFL Wise guys put both their entries on the Commanders. Man, I mean, I don't have the stuns to do that. But kudos to them. They're through. I don't know when they're going to split. They're going to split this upcoming week. Do they have a good spot?
I assume if you've gone this far, the plan's probably Christmas, right?
Probably.
I mean that's the
two sides.
That's
of
the
the
week
game?
that if you're going to take maybe two sides of the game or just two different games. I haven't looked at what they have, but you pick any one team, there's roughly a 50% chance you're busting on Christmas. So if you take two totally different games, assuming they're all 50-50,
sure.
There's really only about a 25% chance you're going to lose both of them, right? So that's, obviously if you take both sides of the same game, there's a very small chance, I'll say a third of a percent or something that they tie.
Imagine
that'd be unbelievable if there's a
tie. Oh my God. That would be so sick.
What a parlay.
Now, there was another entry out there that had multiple. What did they go?
It was C3 picks. We talked about C3 picks quite a bit. Yeah. Cardinals and Vikings.
Yeah, they
split them up.
Yeah.
Like it.
Man. All right. Well, everybody but one gets through for the second consecutive week.
Yep.
Sorry there. Detroit 6 Mile. Rough.
And how greedy are we all, right? Because I know we're not the only ones. You get through and you're still pissed that someone didn't lose, but all those people are pissed we didn't lose or you didn't lose. There's no...
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, that's a wrap for...
the first half. It's not a wrap. You
wrap.
can see the little bar on the bottom still says we have
Week
time.
15 wrap. Let's take a quick break, and we're going to be back to discuss Week 16.
Yes, sir.
Missing out on the biggest sports contest of the year just because you're not in Las Vegas? Now there's a solution with Survivor Sweat. Play from anywhere in the Circa Millions, Circa Survivor, or any of the biggest sports contests with America's first secondary marketplace to buy and sell contest entries. Buy an entry in the marketplace and then submit your picks each week into the contest using our preferred proxy partners. Make a deep run in a winner-take-all contest? Sell any piece of your Survivor entry in the Survivor Sweat secondary marketplace. Set your price, stake, and pick control status, and buyers can join the action from anywhere. Buyers can even resell their stake if the entry increases in value. Think of it as an eBay for sports contests. Now's your chance to win over $16 million. To learn more, visit survivorsweat.com and get started today.
All right, we're back. Looking ahead to week 16, the week before the Christmas special week. What do we got in these teams here?
What do we got? Here we go again. So, again, initial global popularity rankings, because, again, we kind of do this on the early side.
Sure.
And these usually do not take the special circa weeks into account, so we kind of manually adjust them. The reason for that is it's just a much larger population of potential picks to look at. Theoretically, you should have Green Bay as the most popular this week for a pretty good reason, playing against a pretty bad New Orleans team at home. But theoretically, it would be in the 30s. You'd have Atlanta, 21% estimated taking them against the Giants. Now, that'll be interesting with the new quarterback. And even though some may not think it matters, the Giants have a decent defensive line, and they could get after him pretty good. It'll be, it went from, personally, I would have been more inclined to trust Cousins there just because he's a vet. He's been around a while. Yeah. He's not going to be as pressured. To me, it's a little bit of a weird game to just throw Penix in, but we'll see.
Well, the books have spoken because pre-line was Atlanta minus 10 with Cousins, and now it dipped down to 8.5. So right. Vegas has spoken, and they think Penix is 1.5.
And what I think absolutely doesn't matter at all to what Vegas thinks, I would concur for whatever it's worth. I mean, I probably would say it's 2.5 difference, but moving the line down from 8.5 to 7.5 is a little more meaningful. I don't think it's ever going below that, but I could see it going to 8.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think it's going back to 9.5 or anything like that. And I think it's nothing against Penix. Penix could turn out to be fantastic. It's just, I don't know. At this point, you've come so far this year. Maybe they want to take a look at him now so they don't have to make some odd decision in the offseason. But at this point, I don't know. I think you just wait till the season ends.
Yeah, I mean, as a Survivor player here, it's the unknown. I mean, you want to make picks on data and information that you're aware of or are comfortable with. And now with Penix, you just don't know. He could be better. He could be worse.
Right, and this is the thing. How do you feel? Because I don't know if we would have used him yet in our last entry. I think we had held him, and it might have been for this week at one time. How do you feel if you've been holding Atlanta and now you wake up and you've been holding him for this week for a month and you wake up and this is the guy that's playing? And this is what we talk about all the time. We talk about it in the context of injuries, but it's the same thing. Suddenly the quarterback you thought was playing isn't playing, and I don't know. It's a weird spot, and I don't get it also. I would get it if they weren't actually in a playoff race. And they shouldn't be in a playoff race, but for the fact they play in the worst division debatably in the history of football. Sure. But actually, Tampa Bay actually looks somewhat legit, even if they weren't playing in that division.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield has been phenomenal. Total kudos to him. He's been great. And, especially dealing with injuries, losing wide receivers, and he still comes out winning or competitive even when he loses.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know. It's strange to me that if you're in a playoff hunt, like I could see when the Giants are like, okay, we want to try a different quarterback. Whatever. Makes complete sense. But if you're in a playoff hunt here, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
Strange to me.
To back up a bit, if you have the Packers, I don't see how you're not playing the Packers here. I mean, it's 14.5-point favorites.
Yeah, and I was just going down the popularity list, but yes.
You're right.
And I'll just dump 2 or 3 more and look at you got, then you're looking at like Buffalo, Cincinnati, Arizona in terms of popularity, not necessarily in terms of who you might want to take. But yes, I agree with you. If you have the Packers, what are you waiting for?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think they have much future value. They have a pretty tough slate moving forward.
They are at home against Chicago in Week 18, so it's a question, though, of how meaningful is that game to either of them. It could be.
Could be.
Not likely to the Bears, but, I mean, it could be to the Packers. They could be playing for some playoff seeding.
Sure.
But, yeah, don't know.
I mean, 25 have them available, so, I mean, I would be absolutely floored, surprised if we don't see...
Push the button. This is again,
45, 50% that are going to be on the Packers this week. Right below them, the Bills -14, home versus the Patriots. I hear there's supposed to be some snow. 89% win rate. 16 have them available in Circa. You could have up to 32% there. And then to your point, I think below that, you're going to have to take a strong look at the Atlanta Falcons there and decide if you are good moving forward with Penix. You got the Bengals, 21 have them available, home versus the Browns. Looks like Winston's now benched. They're going with the backup. We'll see. We keep thinking, well, Bengals have to win to get themselves. They don't have any room for error. So
they can't just wheel Deshaun Watson back out there? Put him in a massage bed, wheel the whole bed out?
No. Cardinals -4.5 at the Panthers. I mean, the Cardinals can beat any team in the league. They can lose to any team in the league.
They've done both.
40 have them. It looks like the public maybe 6%.
They do, and it's funny because Carolina starts the year and goes through most of the year as quasi-laughing stock of the NFL organization, top down from ownership down to quarterback, literally everything in between. And now I'm not going to tell you they're great by any stretch. I'm not going to say they're a tier 1, tier 2 team, tier 3 team. I'm not going to tell you if they started the season the way they're playing now that they could win that crappy division and or make the playoffs. But they're far, far, far more credible than they were before. I don't think teams are. I really do. NFL teams say they don't do this. They're full of it. They do this. They look at the sheet and they go, great. We're going to start looking to next week a little bit because we know we're pretty comfortable we'll get through this game.
Sure.
And there's only so much time you have to process information. I don't think they're doing that with the Panthers anymore. They know they're going to come game.
Looking out a few weeks, you had Arizona in either last week versus New England or at Carolina. Surprised not a lot were on them last week. So, maybe if you were holding them, thinking they were going to play them versus the Panthers here, it just doesn't feel like a warm and fuzzy spot for sure.
Like I said, the Panthers I'm a little bit more concerned with the Panthers now than some of these other quote-unquote bad teams because I think that if the players look past it, it's a big mistake. Yeah. And they're just a little more game.
And I know a lot of it obviously comes down to availability and what you have available to take. But sprinkled down there's Bucks -3.5. 22 can take them. I know Bucks have a really good Week 17B spot. You got Colts versus Titans. Now Rudolph's going to play. I don't think the Titans look as juicy to play against. Not that the Colts have been world beaters, for crying out loud.
No, and we skipped over a game here because I would have skipped over it anyway, but it does show up on the list. I don't know why someone would want it. You know which one I'm going to say. I think it's
Ravens Steelers?
Yeah, if you've held Baltimore this long, I don't understand. Like a 6-point game, I know Pittsburgh didn't look great that week. Baltimore looks like world beaters. I take the 6 anyway. I do believe Baltimore's right to be favored. I'm certainly not suggesting Pittsburgh should be favored, but I can't even... It would be beyond me as to why somebody would want to take this spot with Baltimore. I mean, if you didn't have anybody else, that's almost impossible. Because if you didn't have anybody else, you're probably then saving Baltimore for Christmas. So if you use Baltimore here, who are you using on Christmas? Like I can't even imagine who's left. Who are you using in week 18, the rest of week 17? I don't think there's anybody here that only has Baltimore, has another Christmas entry, and has anything credible the rest of the year. So I would be... The over-under on Baltimore is 0.5 and the under's -250.
Just kind of why I skipped over it because, divisional opponent, they play each other tough, and they beat each other on the road. From time it's in 3-point game. It doesn't matter.
I said I'll take the 6.
Exactly. And so, 12 have them available. I can't. To your point, if 1 or 2 land on them,
I take the under.
Yeah, I definitely.
It would just be a weird. People do weird stuff. Maybe because we're out here saying this, someone goes, "Oh, good." If they listen to the pod, they won't take them, and I'll be on an island. But I'd rather be with 5 other people on Cincinnati or Buffalo than be on an island with Baltimore here.
Yeah, you got Rams -3 at Jets. I know Jets got the win. Rams are looking pretty good. They seem not to have too much of an issue playing on the road. They kind of got it humming over there.
They do look good, but you're still looking at. It's close. You can take them here. You can take them 60% versus Arizona. You can take them, if the game matters, 66% versus Seattle at the end of the year. Yeah. And I do think that game's likely to matter for the Rams. So.
And then the last one I have on there, Vikings -3. No idea if Geno Smith's going to play or not. He's questionable. If Geno ends up not being available, 8 have the Vikings right there. that might be a good spot.
Yeah, and I've said, I know you've been a little more skeptical about the Vikings for the year, and you're like, somehow they keep winning. And I'm like, I think they're actually a legit team. When they played that game and lost, grant you, against Detroit, they were pretty live. And at that moment, Detroit was clearly the best team in the NFL.
Yeah.
Although Belichick, I saw one of the interviews he did, and, he was asked about the Lions, and he said, I think they're great. I like Dan Campbell. I like what he's done with the program down there. But I'm paraphrasing, but I don't think they're going to be able to overcome the issues they have on defense, the injuries that they have on defense, to actually be able to run the table on this thing. And he's probably right. And you saw that last week.
Yeah.
They could score, and they had no issue scoring. They had no issue getting the ball to St. Brown. But the defense just couldn't, against a quality offense, they really, really struggled.
Yeah, the Thursday game this week, you got Denver at the Clippers. We always call them the Clippers, the Chargers.
No one has Denver left, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
And I don't think you're going to be banging the door down to take the Chargers.
That's not a game for Survivor. And then on Saturday, there's 2 contests.
Yep.
The Ravens Steelers that we just mentioned, and then Chiefs Texans. And again,
What a coincidence! They also both play on the following Wednesday.
They just flip flop
because the NFL wants to make sure they have adequate rest, because the NFL is all about player safety.
Sure. So I think everybody's going to adhere to the Saturday 4:00 submission. I don't think you're gonna be you're not going to be in play on Thursday, and not going to be in play on Saturday.
I don't think so.
Speaking of in play, I mean, is Mahomes going to be in play on Saturday?
Don't know. And then you're dealing with the same thing. So if he doesn't play on Saturday, how confident are you he plays the following Wednesday?
Yeah, exactly. So if you had KC slated for that game, man, I don't know. I mean, you almost don't want him to play, and then maybe he plays the following week. Not sure.
It's yet another reason, not that I thought anybody was, if you have Pittsburgh here, as Baker said a number of weeks back, he thinks they end up being the chalk. And if you've held him to this point, it's a good spot to hold him again. Maybe Mahomes does play, but you just don't know he's going to play. And now Carson Wentz can come out and look pretty good, or look terrible. Who knows? I mean, you just don't know what they're going to look like. Sure. There.
Speaking of Christmas, Nick, what are some of those percentages? Because they have been bouncing around.
Oh, and wait, sorry,
so
before I forget, because I always forget these things. We tried to answer a question last week about whether or not if you went into Christmas and didn't have a pick at all.
Yes.
And everybody else busted, did you chop with everybody that was remaining? And there was some ambiguity in the rules, in my opinion, as they were written. We finally did hear back, and it's as I suspected initially before reading the actual language, which kind of made me a little more confused. If you get to Christmas and don't have a team, you're done. It doesn't matter if everybody else gets knocked out, you're getting 0.
Yeah.
You're considered busted. Even though it says you're busted at the end of the day, don't think of it, because they're saying you're definitely busted at the end of the day, but think of it this way, you're busted when kickoff happens, not when the game ends.
Correct. And we got confirmation on that.
And I don't think, to be honest, it's going to matter much this year, because I would bet quite a bit of money there's more than 3 teams taken. So with 4 teams taken, you'd need 2 to outright lose, and the other game to tie, so to have nobody left. So, I mean, it's not a 0% probability, but it's a pretty big parlay.
Sure.
So anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I just didn't want to forget to answer from last week.
All good. We got the Ravens at 60%. They are currently the biggest favorite on the board with that 60% win rate. So
yeah, they
it's
shot
bouncing.
Out there,
yeah. And then speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, 54% win rate. They've flip-flopped
back to Mahomes.
Yeah.
So I think Vegas thinks that he'll be playing in that football game.
Clearly, although even earlier when people assumed he'd be playing the game, I thought it flipped for a while anyway to Pittsburgh. It's just Pittsburgh didn't look good this 1 week against Philly. And suddenly you're going to say they're not a credible team anymore? I mean, come on.
Exactly.
And it jumped,
Flip-flopped.
And then we got the Seahawks at 54% win rate versus the Chicago Bears. And I was wondering if you guys wanted to comment on Geno Smith, maybe.
Well, I mean, they're better with him under center. I mean, he hasn't been playing his best football, either of the Bears. But, I mean, looking at him, you have 3 road small favorites, 2 with QB issues.
Yep.
I mean,
it's early yet. You could get 3 or 4 with QB issues.
Oh,
QB issues happen like that in the NFL.
100%. So, we got another week to go through the gauntlet here.
And I'll stand by what I said. God, it's got to be 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, whatever. If you were holding a team for Christmas within any team in the NFL, you're almost always worried about a quarterback issue. There's always going to be a decent drop-off. Of all the teams in the NFL, I think that it's possible that Pittsburgh has the smallest drop-off.
Sure.
I mean, not counting somebody like if you were looking at the Bears, like, just because it's a young quarterback. They're trying to learn with him. Their backup quarterback, it's not going to matter that much, but you're not looking to take the Bears necessarily in many situations. Sure. But I do think that Pittsburgh has the smallest drop-off if they lose a quarterback.
Absolutely.
And to your point, you stated that you felt that there'd be at least 4 teams. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 5.
Yeah,
maybe
minimum 4,
maybe even 6.
It's possible.
I mean,
because you could just have, it's a setup, right? Like you could have been sitting there saying, I'm holding the Chiefs, and that's the only team I've held, and suddenly Mahomes isn't playing.
Yeah.
So other people that had the Chiefs and another option, well, they're not going to take the Chiefs, right? So you easily can end up with both sides of that game. How many people have the Texans left?
3.
That's the only ones. You'd have to take a look. Do the people that have the Texans left have any other options on Christmas? If the answer is no, you're getting closer to getting to 6, legitimately to 6.
Yeah.
Because we already know there are some people. The only way nobody takes the Bears on Christmas is if the guys that only have the Bears bust this week. Because there are a couple of entries that have to take the Bears, right?
I haven't done the research yet, but I did see out there in the Twitter universe that 45 out of the 50 had a single play. Like it's already like
right.
The path is there for them already, and then there are 5 or so that have multiple options.
Right, but I'm like, say the Bears are the single play for somebody. That means somebody has to take the Bears on Christmas, unless all of those people go out this week.
Yeah,
that's the other. So the only way you're going to get some number less than 5, I think you're right, is if some of those guys go out now.
Sure.
But it'll be interesting. It'll be crazy if you get all six.
I'm
spots.
telling you what, because I mean, you look at the Packers and Bills. I mean, if they're anywhere close to the max, 50 and 32% on them, I think you're going to show up with the majority of this pool is going to go down to Christmas, and it's going to be like moving day at the Masters. I mean, it is going to be fireworks because you've waited this whole time, and there's going to be a loser of one of those sides of the game,
that's why
and
I've
maybe
struggled,
even both with a tie.
That's why I've struggled for this whole year when people say how many do you think will be left after Christmas? Do you think it'll make it to Christmas? I've said from the very beginning, 100%. I've always thought it'll make it to Christmas. I never really had much doubt. I'm not necessarily sure. I am now pretty certain it makes it to 17B, right? Whether it makes it to 18, I'm less certain. I think it does, but I'm not sure because you just end up exactly with what you said. If one of these games ends up in a tie, or exactly what is the breakdown if all 6 teams are taken, what's the breakdown look like? You could come out of Christmas with the 3 people that only have the Bears, and they could be the only ones that get through.
And just looking at 17B, there's only a couple.
Oh, there are terrible spots there. The whole week is amazingly
I think
bad.
if you have the Bucks, you're in the best spot. Maybe Bucks or Bills, not sure.
And then Bucks are great.
And then week 18, it is just an absolute crapshoot. So I think
Although actually, you did say one person didn't take the Eagles or something that had them. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Eagles are actually the best spot. They're going to play Dallas at home, and that's the biggest favorite of the week.
2 have the Eagles available.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great spot for them. Fantastic.
Speaking of which, Nick, availability, some of these teams are getting chopped.
Yeah. I'm just gonna lightning round this just because we've talked about it so much. But Lions and Broncos, goose egg. Commanders 1, Eagles 2, Houston and the Dolphins are 3, Chargers 4, Jets 5, Chiefs 7, Vikings 8, Ravens 12, Niners 12, Bills 16, Bengals 21, which surprises me. Seahawks 21 as well, Bucks 22, which I was saying that surprised me last week as well, just because I think they're good. Packers 25, Rams 30. Chicago 31, and then I forgot to mention the Steelers that are back in there. They're at 27. So.
Yep, exactly. And looking, I took a screenshot of the weekly team distribution on Survivor Atlas, and based on entries availability or their best availability, this is where the pie chart would somewhere land. So this week, obvious with the 16, it had Green Bay Buff, and it had a lot of Atlanta, so that could change.
Good.
And then you're looking down at
By the way, I don't think it's going to change as much as it might normally because by this point in the season, your path is not set in stone, but it's getting close.
Yeah, good point.
Like you've saved Atlanta. What do you think you still have? If you were saving Atlanta, you still have like Philly left? Probably not.
And to your point, they have, so the pie chart here shows that 5 teams will be taken, but I don't know. I mean, Yeah, I can see a Houston in there, and Lamar has to come out clean. So if that's just how it goes, and then you look at 17B and 18, and you just see teams sprinkled all over the place.
And by the way, I think if hard to have the stones to pull the trigger on it, but the reality is if you've got Houston available, it's a great spot. I mean, the reality is it's unlikely, but there's a chance you could win the entire pool by taking a team that's 43% to win or something like that, or 40% to win. That's not a bad spot. It's not like you're out there taking a team that's 10% likely to win. 40% of the time you advance and you've got some significant amount of time that you actually lose. Both other games lose. They're basically 50-50 games. So 25% of the time they both lose those other two games. 40% of the time you win. That's not bad. It's like 12% of the time ish, 10% of the time you win the entire pool.
Yeah.
Like that's phenomenal.
No, we would definitely have to think about it.
That's phenomenal.
If we had them available, for sure. Absolutely. Well, if you have nobody available or want more teams available, head on over to Survivor Sweat and take a look what they got on the marketplace. How did things go last week, Nick?
Well, really good. I'm going to give you guys the numbers, then I want to talk about something after this. So there was 26.
Is it health insurance or pudgy penguins?
Well, thank God
health
we weren't.
Insurance for pudgy penguins?
Thank God we weren't rolling when we all got here in the studio. We took a while to hit the record button.
We did. I hope anyway.
We had 26 total listings on the marketplace, 22 total offers, 12 total sales, lowest percent sold. It's always 1%. And then we had the highest percentage sold, which was 95, which means the average equity value came out to $232K, which leads me into my next point. I posted it on our YouTube channel here so you guys can watch it. Our creator, James, was just on VSiN last week and discussed this last record sale that we have. Somebody bought a pick for about 130 to 135K off, and that pick only has the Bears available, Russ, on Christmas Play. So I was wondering if you guys wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, I think that, first of all, I think it's great the platform exists, because a couple of years ago, this guy with the Bears is like, oh God, what do I do? He'd be asking the question, how do I hedge? Is it too early to start hedging? And we'll cover that later. The answer is yes, it probably is too early to start hedging. But I think it's great. I mean, the Bears are, they've been around 50% for this game most of the year. They are probably I probably prefer taking the Texans to the Bears, even though I think the Texans might end up being bigger dogs. But the reality is, it's not like you're dealing with a team that literally cannot win a game. It's not like they're 5%, 10%, 15%. I mean, they're, 40% to win the game. So
sure.
That doesn't mean it should be a 40% discount off face. I mean, in theory, then fair market value should be maybe a 10 or a 20% discount off face. But you're not going to get a lot of buyers at that number, right? So it's what the market will bear. But I think it's a great purchase, in my opinion. I'm not saying it's a bad sale. It's a great purchase. The person purchasing is purchasing based on the value of this entry. I think it makes a ton of sense. The person selling could be selling for a zillion reasons. It could be because he doesn't believe in the Bears. It could be because he, at whatever point he is in his life, he doesn't want to have a $100,000 bet on the Bears. Like that's very reasonable.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I mean, everybody's threshold's a little bit different. Everybody's finances are a little bit different. You buy this entry for $1,000, you turn around, you sell for 100. Well, not just turn around, but you sell it now for 130%. I mean,
and I don't mean to sound cheesy about this, and you had a great time, because the reality is everybody buys an entry with a dream they can win. Everybody knows it's a dream. Nobody comes in, they know it's a lottery. Nobody comes in going, I'm going to win this one in 3 years. You can't win.
Yeah, the person who sold it for 134, you never know. That could be life-changing money for that guy, right?
Like I was going to say, and there's going to be a lot of room in between this. If you're making $500,000 a year, you probably shouldn't sell that pick for 134. If you're making $50,000 a year, you should have taken 90 a couple of weeks prior and taken the money, right? Like, exactly. And I'm not being critical. I mean, it's just a very realistic thing to do. You shouldn't be gambling with 2 years pay, which is what you're still doing. You're flipping coins on multiple years pay. When you're coming down to a game like that. Yeah. So
and we discussed earlier earlier this year the correlation between teams when they get clipped and the marketplace. So I jumped on the marketplace right before we got on air here, and there's only 8 entries on the marketplace.
Wow, that's as a percentage, that's the lowest it's been in 2 months probably.
And,
as a percentage of remaining entries.
And I think the correlation is only one got knocked out, and you got a heavy dose of the Packers and a heavy dose of the Bills, and they think they're just going to push the button, move forward, and then the value, if one or two can get clipped, and then they walk into,
It's funny, though, because just like trying to pick a team that isn't the chalk because you'd rather be a little bit on an island, I personally think listing your entry for sale when there are not a lot listed is the better time to list. Because
sure, absolutely.
then you just don't have a lot of, because even us, when we look, the first thing I'll do, we all look slightly differently, but I'll sort by price per point that people are asking, and then we'll look at who they have and see if this makes sense, right? So price per point cheapest first, to be clear. And so if you've only got 8 entries, you're not necessarily competing with a guy that's listing a little cheaper anymore.
Sure.
Right. So, and it's hard to get through all of these that when there are, 30 up there, it's hard to really break down each of them with everything they have left in a timely fashion.
Good point.
So I think it's actually a better time to list these things.
Yeah. And so out of those, ranging between 4,000 for a point, up to 35K for 14%, the intrinsic value of an entry is $285,320. Last sale, 12K for 5%. So the average per point was between 2,800 and 3,000. It was like right in that range. I didn't break that down, but that's really where the range is there.
And the way I see it is right here. Why would you not sell 1 point at $4,000 a point? Not saying I'd be the buyer for it, but you don't have to say I'm selling 90% of my entry. You go out there and list 5% or 10% at $3,800 a point, $4,000 a point, or even $3,000 a point. I know it's under market, under face, but you're not selling the whole thing off. You could be locking up $30,000.
Yeah, this late in the season, it's okay if it's under face.
Oh, and by the way, if you're one of those entries out there and you only have one option for Christmas, that might be a good time to go swap some percentages and maybe swap with somebody that has the other team and they're forced to take them so that you can move on, at least play week 18.
You have the Bears, find a guy that has the
Seahawks.
Other than
the tie.
Kansas City. Yeah, but you're right other than the tie, but Circa will put out tie lines. And
Yes,
they'll pay
they will.
you, I don't remember, they are 50 to 1, 40 to 1, 30 to 1, whatever. So if you want, you can swap, and if you can afford it, you can put $1,000 down on tie, and then if they tie, you lose your entry, you still win $30,000.
Yeah, so if you're the guy with the Bears entry, maybe you're looking for a Seahawks entry and you're going to pair that way. So, hey, get a piece of something, get to week 18, and maybe you can get to the ticket window at the end and get it.
And who knows, not to try to complicate things more, but maybe you're the guy with the Ravens entry, right? And you got somebody out there that has Houston. It doesn't have to be a 3 for 3, like 3%. You could swap 4% for 3%.
Sure.
I would think.
Yeah, you go this far, I mean, you got to maximize your opportunity to cash out here. Whatever that may be, your threshold. Some of you guys just want to YOLO it. Great, good for you. But I would look into that if I was you. So.
In fairness, in Survivor, it is true you really do only live once.
Hey, Nick, there was a question. You want to discuss that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's from Mr. Mood, and he says, "I'm curious. What are your thoughts on hedging? At what point should I hedge, and when should I set up credit?"
I would set up credit yesterday. I mean, there's no reason not to set up credit. Like, it's silly. I mean, Circa it's fine. They're regulated by the Nevada Gaming Control Commission. So you can go take a bunch of money, stick it at Circa. Yes, you're not earning interest like you would in a bank. But if you have 10,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever it is, just go stick it in Circa. If it turns out you bust and you're like, well, I don't need to hedge because I'm out, just take it out of Circa. Sure. Assuming you're in Vegas, you can arrange with Circa or whatever, preferably legal sports book you have in whatever jurisdiction you're in. Get the money in just in case you need to hedge later. That's the first thing, because come Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, you're not getting money anywhere. You're not moving money around. If you show up at a lot of regulated properties with, if you happen to have this, $50,000 in cash, $100,000 in cash, they don't know who you are. They've got KYC rules. You're going to show up on the 24th, on the 25th. There's a very high probability they're not even taking your deposit, right? So I would go ahead and get the money in there early. With regard to credit, I know they talked last year at Circa about giving people that were remaining in the contest credit. I don't know how that turned out. I'm sure they did, but I'm not sure it's so easy to give credit based just on your entry, because they don't know what path you're taking when you're hedging. So they could do it if you guaranteed you were taking the other side of what your hedge was, right? So if you're betting 20,000 in a team and then you have the other team in Survivor, sure, then they know you're going to win your hedge or it's going to keep advancing. But when they give you credit, I doubt they're restricting what games you can bet on, which makes it more difficult to just randomly extend credit. That was an odd bark we heard here. But I would get that set up right away. In terms of at what point should you start hedging? This gets asked every year. I think with 2 bets to go, 2 games to go, i.e. 17B, is fine. I think maybe 17A with Christmas. Yeah. But before that, I think it's too early. I think when you look at this, you have to keep in mind this stuff is exponential. If you bet $5,000 on a team as a hedge, and of course this is going to vary based on if you're getting plus 200 or if it's even money or whatever. But if you're getting, you're betting 5,000, then next week you probably have to bet 10 to kind of win back your original bet plus what you were trying to win. The next week you probably need to bet 20. Sure. And you're doing this to win 5 or whatever that multiple of 5 was. So, now suddenly you needed 35, 40,000 to try to win the hedge for 5. So, and if you're doing that in 6 figures, just add zeros. So at some point, if you started hedging too soon, you might put 50,000 on one game, the plan to put 100,000 on the next one, with the plan to put 250 on the third one, and watch the book go, you can't. We'll take 100. Sure. And now suddenly you're like, okay, I'll bet the 100. And then if things don't work out right, you could actually end up losing 6 figures and not actually winning Survivor.
To your point, 50 left. I would normally say way too early. I want people to think about this. I want you to think about this. If you're on Green Bay or if you're on the Patriots this week, your hedge is going to be a lot lower in money line.
It's going to cost you a lot more.
It's going to cost you.
You're not getting a price. You're correct.
Yeah, but you could take the other side of the game and get a big plus here with Patriots or with.
But the problem is you have to keep rolling, and you're going to have to roll 3-4 games, and it's just too expensive.
But it's also the last real weekend before the Christmas that takes place on Wednesday, and you've already discussed that.
Here's the misnomer. Everybody says, when should I start hedging? And more people than not think about it based on the number of entries left, rather than thinking about it based on the number of bets you'll have to make, right? So if you told me some crazy stuff happened and you're in week 3 and there are only 4 entries left, people go, I should hedge, there's only 4 left. You still can't, because you're going to have to make 13 bets, 15. You might not, but you might have to make 15, 16 bets. Like it's just too expensive, right? But if you made it to the very last week, it's week 18, and let's just say there are still 50 entries left. Some of them will go, what's the point? Well, you can still hedge there because the average value of each entry is 380,000, whatever it is today, right? Same thing, right? So you're not hedging against 14 million. You're hedging against that 380,000.
Correct.
So you would figure that, if your Survivor entry wins, that's the worst you can do, right? Even if everybody else also wins. So you can go ahead and take your Survivor pick and then take the other side of that game and bet whatever it is you want to bet as a hedge that you have in cash. And you are taking, I don't want to say no risk, you also have to bet the tie, but effectively if you bet the tie, you have a 0 risk transaction, because even if everybody wins, you win your 380 minus your hedge. If your hedge wins, you're going to win at least that, regardless of what happens with everything else in the field.
Correct.
And so you can see it's easier to hedge no matter how many entries are left with 1 week.
Yes.
And it's hard to hedge no matter how few entries are left with 10 weeks. So you have to have a big bankroll and know that you can place very, very large bets if you want to start hedging early.
Yeah. And if you are a Packer backer this week, the game's on Monday night. So, if you have money in there, things might be a little bit different come Monday night.
They could be, but you could be faced with a similar situation.
Sure.
Let's say everybody busts except for you, and you're playing Monday night, okay? And you're literally the only person on the Packers, which isn't going to happen, right? No. If you were the only person on the Packers, 100% you can, and in my opinion, should hedge. Because it's very pure. This will be the last game of Survivor. No matter what, win or lose, you're done, right? Lose your chopping with everybody else, win, it's all yours. But if you still have, 15 people on the Packers and you go ahead and put that hedge in because it looks really cheap to take the other side, what are you doing next week when those 15 people all survived with you and they're all on different games? Yeah. Right? Like it's the same problem. It's how many more weeks are you going to have to do this?
Tough. Well, great question. Thank you for that. And to each his own on the hedging, but that was explained very well for sure. That's it for week 16 look ahead. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give us a question. If you're still in, good luck.
And if you're not, you should be, because you can always go to Survivor at least by a point or two.
Speaking of that, too, I will put the VSiN James interview YouTube link in the description below, so you guys will be able to find that. It's It's a really good interview on Follow the Money.
He did a great job.
You guys should watch that if you're curious about the marketplace.
You should. I've given James a hard time in the past about stuff, and the couple times I've seen him up there, he's been stellar. It's been really good.
Well, you remember what I said in the group chat? I said if I need to get rid of one of you guys, I can just replace you guys with James.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for week 16. Look ahead and hope you survive. Get your pick in, and we will see you next week.
Later.
Looking for Survivor strategy articles? Did you lose your last entry on a Survivor contest and wish you could rebuy? Check out our marketplace and you may find what you need. Head over to survivorsweat.com for all things Survivor. And we'll see you next week for the next Survivor Sweat podcast.